Welcome to this talk, SRE Onboarding from in-person to remote in 13 days, where we will show how we mitigated a potential onboarding outage and what the lessons learned are. I'm JC van Winkel, and I'm here with my colleague Jennifer Petoff. You can find Jen on Twitter @Jensky, and both of us on LinkedIn if you have follow-up questions after the talk. I've been with Google 10 years, 6 of which I was on call for the production monitoring team. I'm a founding member of SRE EDU, the SRE education department of Google that was started in 2015. Before Google, I've been teaching all things Unix, Linux, and programming languages for 20 years at a spin-off of the University of Nijmegen, the Netherlands. And here's my colleague.
Hi, everyone. So thanks, JC. I'm Jennifer Petoff, and I've been at Google for 13 years. I'm currently Google's Director of SRE Education based in Dublin, Ireland. I'm also one of the co-editors of the original SRE book that Google published back in 2016. For virtual conferences like this, I do like to include a few fun tidbits, things that might come up if we sat next to each other at a session or during a lunch or coffee break in real life conference. So here's my fun facts. I actually have a PhD in synthetic chemistry. That gives rise to my nickname, Dr. J. I'm also a part-time travel blogger at Sidewalk Safari. Of course, since we can't travel right now, I'm trying to make do in other ways. I'm a big fan of taking walks around Dublin and photographing Dublin's colorful Georgian doors and posting them on Instagram. So got to maintain those little pleasures in the process. Okay, now that the introductions are out of the way and we know each other a little bit better, let's go over the agenda for this talk. So we're going to start with an introduction to our approach to SRE education. We'll give an overview of the curriculum that we employ. We'll talk about what happened when COVID-19 hit and the results of our mitigations and the lessons that we learned along the way. We'll conclude with some thoughts on the future in the post-COVIDium, as JC likes to call it. So before we dive into the curriculum itself and how it changed in response to COVID-19, I did want to frame the discussion in terms of the service reliability hierarchy adapted to an adapted to a training context. So those of you who've seen JC and I speak before at previous SREcons, you know that we pride ourselves on how we apply SRE principles and best practices to the running of our training programs, to training program operations. And the service reliability hierarchy highlights key elements of an SRE practice from the most foundational elements to the most advanced. And then we've translated those into that training context. So at the base of the pyramid, you've got monitoring, above monitoring, incident response. Once you've resolved whatever issue is happening, you move on to do a retrospective and analysis of root causes. Higher in the pyramid, we're talking about testing and release, capacity planning, and then we fully actualize. You're fully actualized when you get to that sort of development and product level. And again, on the training side, monitoring takes the form of attendance tracking and survey feedback. Incident response is the equivalent as addressing issues that might arise during the training program. Yes, you want to do a similar retrospective and analysis afterwards. We always test teach. You want to test your materials before you launch them to production, so to speak. And scaling your operations, that's the equivalent of capacity planning. And finally, you've got curriculum design and the program itself, the program which includes both the content and the operations required to deliver it at the top of the pyramid. So just want to get that familiarity. Now, for this talk, we're really going to focus in on mitigating and adapting to the rapidly changing circumstances brought about by the pandemic. And this falls squarely into the domain of incident response and retrospective identification of root causes. So we'll focus in more at the base of the pyramid today. And with that, I'll hand back to JC for a minute to talk us through the curriculum.
Yes, we will talk about the curriculum, but before I do that, let's take a quick look at how SREs have been educated in Google over time. For many years, there was no reliability in the way that SREs were trained, no consistency. There were teams that did it this way, teams that did it that way. We call that grokking SRE the hard way. Then in 2014, a group of SREs thought, we need to change this, we need to fix this. and this led to the foundation of Google's SRE EDU team in 2015. We overhauled our program completely after 2 years because we noticed that we needed to have more hands-on. And after that, we have been doing pretty well. More recently, we have been focusing on streamlining the operations and beating down toil to free up cycles to work on higher value added things. Very much like SREs like to make tomorrow better than today. So about our curriculum. We found out in our first version of the curriculum that gaining confidence is the #1 goal, because many people worry that they can't do the job. But then with experience, they find out that they actually can. So the gaining confidence is the #1 service level indicator that we measure. Like I said, experienced SREs have way less doubt about their abilities, and they are more confident. So how can we give the students more experience quickly so they gain that confidence? We do that by actually giving them hands-on work. Basically, they go on call for a service. We have a demo stack that we will show later that mimics real SRE work and real users. And that way we have the students go on call, practice their troubleshooting, and in that way gain confidence. But there is another aspect that is really important and that we need to talk about with the students. And that is the SRE culture. First of all, blamelessness helps gaining confidence, and demonstrating that in class as well. For example, by talking about previous outages and showing blameless postmortems really is important. Having a good social network, knowing who to reach out to is also important to be able to do your work and to get more confident because you know where help can be found. Knowing that failure always happens and that you should be prepared for failure to happen in the future is also important. And about making tomorrow better than today, think about toil removal, avoiding heroism, and that you are not in this alone. There is always someone you can reach out to. Those are the culture aspects. And if we then look at what our curriculum has become, we have different kind of sessions here. By the way, this slide is from the pre-COVIDium. The sessions that we have are culture sessions. What it's like to be an SRE, what do we strive for, reduce toil, things like that. Hands-on sessions, these are the sessions that give the students the practice that will help them gain confidence by actually being on call. Now, of course, we can't throw them for the lions just without any prior knowledge. So we have technical sessions about specific technology within Google, but it is the bare minimum, just enough so that the hands-on sessions will actually work. And the first technical session is about our photo service that we will see in the next slide. And that is there so students can relate to all the exercises that will come. We talked about this in the Americas 2019 SREcon. The social sessions are there to build a social fabric and get to know experienced SREs, hear war stories, and have some fun time. We have timing differences in different locations because of commute times. In Zurich, for example, the commute time is usually very short, and in the Bay Area, the commute time is usually longer. Now remember, this is all before COVID-19 hit. In 4-day weeks, because of holidays, we squeezed the program a bit, sacrificing some of the fun time. The hands-on exercises are done with an application specifically built for this purpose, which I will show you now. The application that we built is a photo upload service, built like a true distributed system with a front end and a back end, and with replicas running in multiple clusters. It is very tangible. You can actually see what the service does, and you can also, as a user, see when something is broken. Users can upload photos, add hashtags, search for certain hashtags, and we don't just have one instance of this, but we have many instances. So groups of 3 students get full ownership of the instance. In the top left, you may see the number 12, which shows that this is the 12th instance of the service. The students can break their own instance without other groups noticing. But most of the time, we break it, and the students have to troubleshoot. They are on call for their own instance. So we have been running this successfully, but...
And then, dun, 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 the coronavirus started roaming the world. And then graceful degradation. So we'd actually been keeping track of how COVID-19 was developing, and we did, proactively take a look at the risks that were posed and put together a series of what-if scenarios just to figure out what we would do in different eventualities. So as the situation unfolded, the probable scenarios really evolved, and what was once the most probably not scenario actually became reality. So it's we know things were evolving very rapidly, and we needed to keep up with that. So, this was really an incident that we were facing. That risk turned into, you can look at it as an actual incident or an outage that we needed to deal with. So as we're going through this, I think it's important to take a look at our incident response timeline between SRE EDU and COVID-19. So starting on March 3rd, we basically got an email from SRE leadership that basically said, based on the way the pandemic is evolving, we need to cancel all in-person training. And as JC alluded to, we typically run in different hubs. We fly people in. It's an in-person instructor-led training experience for our onboarding program. But the tricky part is it's not like we'd stopped hiring people. People are being hired, people are being onboarded, and we can't just leave them hanging with no training and just to sink or swim, if you will. So yeah, so we had to ask the question, how are we going to run orientation? And we needed to make decisions, and we needed to act fast because orientation was about to start in Europe 6 days later. So because on March 9th, we realized the schedule orientation in Europe was needed to be postponed. We just didn't have enough time to do the full adjustments that we needed to make to take our in-person training program to a full remote experience. However, on March 16th, we had our US classes. So a week later, US classes were on, and we pulled that off without a hitch. So we had been able to make the necessary adjustments at that point and run orientation without problem. So this was 13 days after the message from the organization appeared that we needed to change course. And the week after, on March 23rd, orientation also ran well in Europe. So those classes that were scheduled on March 9th, they were delayed, but not canceled. So had a bit of a graceful degradation and delay, and ran successfully a few weeks later. So let me turn it back to JC to talk a little bit about what actually happened in those 13 days to make this possible.
Thank you, Jen. It was a lot of work that we need to do, and this is just a small list of what we have done. We had to create special adapted materials for students, instructors, and the like. Here's an example. The welcome slides contain a map with micro kitchens, bathrooms, printer for each of our teaching hubs. There were also instructions how to meet, where the classroom is, which office building do you go to. We created a short video that explains how to teach in front of a camera. The still on the right that you see here is from that video where the presenter shows that using bad lighting is not very good. In true SRE style, we make sure that we always have a backup. So we made recordings of all the classes. The videos were recorded on the last 2 days before the offices were closed. And then in Sydney, we had new hires that originally would have flown to one of our other hubs, but of course that became impossible. And time zones made it really unrealistic for the Sydney students to attend any of the other site sessions remotely. So we had to find facilitators and instructors and run a train the trainer with them. The exercises also needed to be adapted because in the old days, we would have TAs roaming the room to help groups of free students. Now, the groups of free students are in a virtual breakout room. And with too few TAs, you will notice that the students don't make enough progress. They need a little nudge here and there. So what we did is we use a rotation model where we have enough TAs, and every so many minutes, the TA rotate over the groups of students, and then the group of free students need to fill in the TA, where they have come, what they found out, and so on. This forces the students to rethink what they actually found. It's almost like an on-call handover. We also notice that there is less interaction between the TAs and the students together. There is less micro-kitchen chatter and chatter in the hallways. So we needed extra debrief sessions and more Q&A sessions. So if we look at our new curriculum, we see that we compressed the schedule to 4 days. Yes, fun time needed to be removed. With only 4 days, it's also easier to schedule around public holidays. All the schedules in all locations are now the same because commutes don't count and there is no local fun time anymore, which was different in the different locations. We still have free social Q&A sessions with the SREs, and we scheduled extra debrief sessions to make up for the harder to do exercises with the TAs. Unfortunately, graduation is also shortened. There is no photo op in the SRE EDU t-shirt, and Q&A is more guided. Now, with all of this in place, did we mitigate successfully?
That is a really good question, JC. So did our mitigations work? The only way that we can really know this is through monitoring, which is what we do all the time. Again, in SREing, our SRE training program, we make sure that we have a good handle on what's actually happening. So once again, we're calling on our old friend, the trusty SRE training reliability hierarchy. And of course, at the base of this pyramid, we have our monitoring, the most foundational element of an SRE practice. And again, if you don't have monitoring, you really have no way of telling whether your training program is actually effective or not. And we talked about this slightly before, but the simplest form of training program monitoring and alerting is survey and attendance tracking data. Okay, so what did we find if we took a look at how the remote orientation changes were doing? I'm happy to say that we seem to be doing at least as well as we did before. So we haven't seen any adverse effect on net promoter score. So students saying, yes, I would recommend SRE EDU onboarding to others. And in fact, we actually saw a slight bump in net promoter score. So that was cool. We took a look at some of the open text feedback, which is often quite illuminating. And we saw remarks like, this was very good, given the whole situation. So we expect there was definitely an element of students being more forgiving due to the circumstances, the students perhaps having lower expectations than they might in normal times. All in all, we were very worried going into this pivot, this transition, but it's actually playing out reasonably well. Earlier on, we said that JC was telling us, of course, that the most important goal of SRE EDU orientation is to build confidence. It's not about the fire hose of information. It's not about packing someone's brain with facts. It's about building that confidence to do the job and vanquishing imposter syndrome. So we can see here on this slide that the aggregate confidence that we measured before and after is actually sustained. We actually see that the net increase in confidence is actually slightly higher with our remote during COVID program. And we also see similar trends in the percent of students that report a 1 and a 3 point plus increase in confidence. One other observation I think that's worth calling out is that student confidence before orientation has actually shifted a bit to the left. So there's more students actually reporting that they're moderately not confident before going into orientation. So we hypothesized that this is actually due to the more challenging circumstances of joining a new team, ramping up at home, and so people are not feeling as confident. So but that they are benefiting from the remote onboarding the remote onboarding program and the changes that we've made. In addition, here's some quotes from our students that I'll share. So one student said, "This is a fantastic initiative, and from my own experience and what other people say about other places, might be the best tech onboarding experience in the world." So maybe a little hyperbole here, but I know this made us on the team feel good and appreciated for the work that we do. And especially beyond the core team, we run a lot with volunteers. So I think this is gratifying for our volunteers as well. Thank you for all the hard work on getting the training onto VC. I got a lot out of it and thought it went very smoothly. I think the team did a great job adapting to work from home. Thank you. And then finally, I don't feel like I got less benefits from the training just because it was remote. I had fun. I learned a lot. I loved how intense it was, and I'll miss it. So again, this is why we do the work. We love to hear from our students, and we love to hear their positive experience, and I'm glad it still continues to be positive for them. And let me just say here, I'm gonna hand it back to JC in just one second. But there's definitely some things that were different. Like it's going well. There's things that are different than expected. So I'm gonna turn it back to JC to talk us through the lessons that we learned.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, there are things that didn't go as expected. There are things that went less well, and there are things that went better than expected. Let's take a look at these. What we notice is that students are a bit more shy. They are less likely to ask questions. And to mitigate that a bit, we added more wrap-up sessions, and we added seeding questions for the Q&A sessions to get the conversation going. Students have fewer informal random conversations in the micro kitchens and the hallway. So we planned some explicit, purely social sessions, such as a virtual lunch, and discussing what was added to the yearbook that we share at the beginning of the curriculum. Of course, graduation is not as much fun as it would have been if we gave all the students a t-shirt like this one and then have a photo up with the entire group. And what we also notice is that after our onboarding week, team onboarding is there, and that is even harder nowadays. Therefore, we also give our teams advice. For example, spending plenty of time with human interaction, have an in-team mentor, organize fun time, organize coffee breaks, do specific in-team training, etc., etc. And this way we help our teams to make the onboarding experience better than it would have been if they didn't think about these extra things that are needed. There are also lessons where things actually went better than what we expected. Let's take a look at those. Well, first of all, we've seen a tremendous push of new features in video conferencing software, which turned out to be very, very helpful. And yes, many people are reluctant to teach over video conference, but the engagements from the students actually won the instructors over. Now, one tip that we give all our instructors is tell your students to turn their cameras on. Because if you're looking at a grid of avatars, you don't have any idea how the message you're sending is coming across. However, if you look at a grid of actual living people that may be frowning if they don't understand something, or nodding because I get it now, this gives you the feedback that you normally have in a classroom, and this makes it much easier to teach. We had an interesting side effect. Normally, we only have instructors from our local hubs, and now we can have people from all over the world teach in their own time zone. So we have more geodiversity for instructors, and that means that people can teach even though they are not in one of our hub locations. And people have been taking that to heart, and we see more enthusiastic instructors now. And finally, SREs tend to gravitate towards wanting to solve problems. That has really helped us. Speaking of which, during this entire period, we used the SRE mindset. We had many fine adjustments along the way based on our instructor and student feedback. For example, adjusting the rotation model for TAs or going from 5 to 4 days because the schedule had a lot of air in it without doing the fun time part. Also, our automation for scheduling classes really turned out to be helpful. When we needed to move all the classes in EMEA from the 9th of March to the 16th of March, we did not have a lot of work, despite there were tens of students that we needed to assign to 11 other classes. Our automation took care of it. You only changed the start of the curriculum and the automation made everything happen. And we've also planned ahead. We have a rollback plan. We know exactly what we need to change back and how much lead time we will need whenever we go back to the previous, i.e. the in-person training. And regarding that, we will have to see when that is and how that is. And Jennifer is going to talk about that.
Sounds good, JC. So yeah, that is the key question, the $1 million question or the €1 million question. So what do we do when all this is over? What's our plan for the post-COVIDium, as again JC likes to call it? So I think it will definitely take some time to adjust back again. Like, we've got our rollback plans, but there's still some things we need to sort out. We talked about, all the schedules and all our locations are now identical without the need to account for commuting patterns and other such situations. And we also recognize that there are a variety of questions that still remain unanswered. So these are some of the things that we're currently thinking about. First and foremost, will we ever go back to an in-classroom teaching experience? We've seen from our monitoring data that students are pretty happy with the curriculum. Their confidence is increasing, or is increasing just as much. The Net Promoter Score seems to be fine. Are they giving us a pass because of these unusual circumstances? Will that change if there is the option to go back to an in-person experience and we choose not to? So I think it's a key question. Will we ever go back? Will circumstances allow? Also, how do we optimize the learning environment for the new changes to the new working environment, right? So we've seen a lot of companies moving to an entirely work from home model. Or some companies are considering more of a hybrid model where folks are it's not needed to be in the office every day of the week. So how will we adapt to that? How can we adapt the curriculum to a more hybrid experience if needed, and make sure everyone is included and that it's an inclusive experience, whether you're in the room or you're on a video conference. So I think there's some work to be done there. The other key question for the future, like JC said, there was a lot of enthusiasm from our non-hub instructors. Like, we were able to be more inclusive of more people because of the remote nature of the training. So how can we keep those non-hub instructors involved if we go back to an in-person experience? So stay tuned. These are still questions that we're grappling with. So with that, let's conclude with some overall takeaways from this talk. So number one, we've discovered that we are still able to deliver an engaging and effective curriculum despite the limitations posed by COVID-19. We see that instructors are still enthusiastic and they're eager to teach. And in fact, I think that a lot of folks see this as introducing an element of normalcy in an otherwise extraordinary circumstance. So we're grateful for our instructors and the time and care that they give to this. We've seen that the technology keeps improving and keeps improving in response to the crisis. Never waste a good crisis. It's an opportunity to drive innovation and improvement. We've seen that new Google SREs seem to be receptive to remote learning and are grateful that we haven't just canceled or left them to sink or swim. And one other cool aspect, so remote onboarding is actually in a lot of ways more easily scalable. You can tap into a wider range of teaching assistants and instructors from different locations, and you don't have to worry about getting people to the right place at the right time. Getting on a plane and traveling somewhere, or getting to the right room in the right building, et cetera. So it can scale actually easier in this remote model. So that's all well and good, but I'll leave you with one final insight here. You may be wondering, how can you apply what we've learned to your own onboarding situation? I think the key thing to think here, the key thing to do here is to do what SREs do best. Apply those elements of the service reliability hierarchy, particularly those first 3 levels, to assess your situation, put some mitigations in place, and then evaluate how it actually went. And just wanted to say, you got this. Use those SRE best practices, and you can expect great results. So before we move on to the discussion after the talk, I did want to share a couple of resources. So first and foremost, we've got a report that JC and I are co-authors on, along with a few other members of the Google SRE team. It's a report on training SREs. We include a variety of best practices on instructional design, operations, and actually applying those SRE principles to the training program itself. So check out bit.ly/training-SREs. And I would just say, so again, I can be found on Twitter @JenSki if you have any follow-up questions. JC is not on Twitter, but he's on LinkedIn, and both of us are actually on LinkedIn if you'd prefer to get in touch with us that way, if there's any follow-up questions related to this material. And with that, we will conclude and head over to the post-talk discussion. Thanks very much, everybody.